I'm now going to install the check balls. So all TH400s take 6 check balls, except for the ones produced between 88 and 90, and they take 7. However, for this build, and really anytime you're going to be dual feeding the direct clutch internally, you're going to omit the number 1 check ball, which is for direct. So otherwise, for a street vehicle, you want to use the remaining 5 check balls so that your part throttle shifts aren't too harsh. Now, if this was going to be a full race transmission, I would only use the low reverse check ball, and I would only use the intermediate check ball. Those are the only 2 I would run. All the other ones I would remove. So run the 5 check balls. That'll give relatively sedate part throttle shifts. And then once you go wide open, then you'll have nice, firm, crisp shifts as you would expect. So I'm going to put a little assembly lube on the worm tracks, and then we'll install the spacer plate to case gasket. So TH400 gaskets identify themselves with a little C for case, and then the valve body gasket has a VB on it. All right, now I want to install something called a test plate, and what this is it simulates the valve body being bolted to the worm tracks, so that when the valve body's in operation, you have different valve stroking based on what shifts are being commanded by the governor. And the purpose of this is to identify any issues with the case, from an apply standpoint, so that we can go back inside the transmission and fix them before it goes out the door. So all the B's indicate where bolts go, and then I have the clutch circuits identified based on what they are. Okay, we'll start out with forward. Direct. Intermediate. Then our intermediate manual band. And then low reverse. Now through this plate, low reverse is a little sketchy. It may or may not apply. Yeah, where the hole is, there's actually gasket. There's no corresponding feed hole. But we checked low reverse just a few seconds ago and confirmed it was good to go. So anyway, that's the purpose of the test plate. And I really wanted to hear forward apply. I wanted to hear direct, intermediate, and then the intermediate band, and they all sound good to me. So, okay, the case gasket and check balls in place. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the spacer plate. So, what I did is I drilled the third clutch feed hole to 120 thousandths and the second clutch to 110 thousandths. Now, in most circles, this is considered conservative, especially given I'm leaving the 2-3 accumulator active. However, my thought process is that I'd rather be a little conservative initially, with the understanding that the customer may have to bring either the valve body or the spacer plate back to me for adjustments after the initial test drive if the shifts aren't firm enough for him. If I go too aggressive, however, it may be such that he doesn't even want to drive the car. Whereas if I'm conservative, yeah, the shifts may not be ideal as far as firmness, but he'll still drive the vehicle, and he'll still be able to get around with it. There may not be time right away for him to drop the pan, bring the valve body back and the spacer plate so I can make my adjustments. The other thing too is he can drive the car over back to me, and we can go and take a cruise together, and I can see for myself how it's shifting, how it's how it feels from the driver's point of view, and then we can kind of define the subjective term of shift feel or shift quality together, so that we're on the same page about what needs to be done, if anything. So that's my rationalization. And I think that that's a good way to go if you don't have the vehicle available to you, and you're not going to be doing all of the the trial and error calibration yourself on test drives. I do all bench builds. I don't ever see the actual car or truck that the transmission's going in, or it's very rare. I mean, maybe the driver will bring it back and we'll take a cruise together for one reason or another. But for the most part, when it comes to removal reinstallation, that's all done outside of my shop. One last thing, this is the high reverse feed port. If for whatever reason you cannot plug the feed location in the case itself like we did with the 3/8 cup plug, you can plug this hole here. You can typically use like a small, small little aluminum plug or even welding wire, and then pin it in place to make sure it doesn't move. I don't recommend going this route, at least not by itself. I prefer to plug the case using the 3/8 inch cup plug. That's a lot more reliable. There's almost zero chance, I would say there's zero chance of apply fluid backfilling into the reverse circuit when you're shifting into third gear, and that's really what you want to prevent from happening. So some builders will do this and the cup plug in the case, and they will even go so far as to plug the hole in the center support on the right side, so it corresponds to, well, there's a gasket in the way, but it would correspond to the right side feed hole, and then you have your feed bolt, and then you have the left side feed hole, which is for direct. And I don't know if I'm pointing at the right place or not. Again, the gasket's in the way, but you get the general idea of where I'm going with it. So for plugging the hole to internally dual feed, your best bet is to just simply use the 3/8 inch cup plug with a little bit of red Loctite, like you saw me do a little bit earlier. Before you drop the valve body in, you want to install the little governor filter. It's going to go in this location. It's going to be the port closest to the parking gear. So it's going to go in, cone facing up. And I'm just going to tap it until it seats at the bottom. It's going to stick out a little bit, but the feed pipe's going to go right over top of it. Kind of like this. Okay, next step is to grab your valve body and then insert the governor feed tubes in their locations. It's like this. And then make sure that you engage the manual valve. And then slowly kind of work the tubes for the governor in place. And then you just stick a couple bolts in to get things started. And you may have to jostle the valve body a little bit to get it, 100% aligned with the spacer plate and all the holes in the case. So you don't want to thread these down and snug them up before they're all fully installed. kind of get them all started. Make sure that they're all seated and threaded at least maybe 2 or 3 turns into the case before you zip them on down. The 2-3 accumulator sits on top of the intermediate manual band servo, so it'll be, it'll offer resistance until you zip the valve body bolt fully onto the deck, and then once it's down, then it'll be fine. Valve body bolts, C 98 inch pounds. So that's 98 inch pounds. Not sure if the car going by obscured what I was saying, but it's 98 inch pounds. And again, no particular torque sequence for this, just kind of start in the middle and work your way out. And then you'll finish up with the 7/16 inch bolts. Next is going to be your detent solenoid. So it's going to be like this. You want the filter side that kind of radiuses up a little bit. That goes facing down into the case. So it takes two 7/16 inch bolts, and these only get 90 inch pounds. So we're going to plug in our wire for our switch. And you know what? Got to take one of these valve body bolts out so I can reattach the little eye loop. Okay, last thing we're going to do is install the filter. So you're going to lube up your pickup tube, O-ring, and then this side's going to go into the case. And then your filter itself. So let me kind of show you how that went, the orientation went. So these two tabs here, they go like this relative to the corner of the case. So there's two washers. Okay, let me pull this off again. There's two washers. Then you have a spacer. And then two more washers. I mean, I've seen a variety of different setups for the filter. This is just one of many. And that's all that's really needed to hold this in place. You don't need to get crazy with the torque. You just need the filter to be. Let's put the pan on. Make sure you have a magnet. You don't want any kind of ferrous material, microparticles, whatever, floating around inside the pan, only to be picked up and recirculated back through the transmission. When this came in, there was no magnet. Maybe the customer took it off, but I doubt it. More than likely, there was no magnet there from when it was rebuilt. So, I think I mentioned it, but these are all 1/2-inch bolts. So if we have to take this out, the valve body out of the, out of the car, spacer plate to do adjustments, I'm going to actually advise my customer to purchase an aluminum deep pan for this transmission. Again, this whole thing was painted before it got to me. I never paint the pan itself. These stamped steel pans hold in a lot of heat, generally speaking, but paint, adds an additional layer of heat retention. And, the two things that kill transmissions are RPM and heat. So, I would advise anybody, if they have the, it's in their budget and they have the ground clearance, to add a deeper aluminum pan to any transmission that they got in their car. It doesn't matter what it is, so that you get a little bit more fluid capacity, which means a little bit more cooling capacity, and at the same time, aluminum dissipates heat better. In my opinion, it looks better, and you're not dealing with this stamped steel pan with no drain bolt. Okay, last thing we need to do is install the extension housing, and then that's it. Have the gasket being held in place by some assembly lube. Whatever you do, do not use RTV on this surface or the pan, or frankly any anywhere else for that matter on the transmission. There's very, very few transmissions that I could think of, automatic transmissions that is, that specifically require the use of RTV. The FMX is one, and I think there's like one or two others, but at least that I've done. Off the top of my head, I can't remember them, but point I'm making is that if you're having a problem getting a surface to seal, whether it be the the belly pan or extension housing or something like that. Either the bolts aren't being torqued correctly, or there's something wrong with one of the two mating surfaces. It's usually the smaller of the two parts. So in the case of the extension housing, it would be this. This might be warped, which is very, very rare. I've seen instances where pans are warped, and no matter what you did, they wouldn't seal. You put like tons and tons of RTV in there, and it still wouldn't matter. But RTV is no good because it likes to break off on the inside of the transmission and circulate throughout and get in every nook and cranny. And that could mean lubrication passages. It could mean valve body, pump, anywhere else where you can't have that kind of material in there because you're going to have a big problem with functionality. So avoid the RTV at all costs. If you're doing everything right with installation and you're having a problem with leaks, then chances are the part you're working with is warped. $25 foot-pounds for these. Okay, transmission's all done. So overall, the build went well. No major issues or problems. Internally dual fed to the direct clutch, so it should provide a lot more clamping force for the high clutch, high gear. Like I said, this build is, when I say build in this case, I mean the whole vehicle is not really intended to be a racing car or anything like that. It's just going to be a fun cruiser. It's a classic car. It's in great shape. I've seen pictures of it. And this transmission should work out nicely for the owner. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Catch you on the next one.